All right, well, joining me this afternoon, we have Julie Bauke, and we are going to be speaking a little bit about job seeking. It's getting to the nitty gritty here at the end of 2021, and so many people are already setting their horizons for 2022, setting their goals. And for some, that's going to be getting a new job, whether it's, getting back into the workforce after COVID hit, or maybe just completely switching industries. Julie, is this a good time to be job seeking?
It is. The holidays, traditional wisdom says that the holidays are a terrible time to look for a job. We have never believed that. But I will tell you, one of the best things you can be doing for yourself right now as you look toward 2022 is start thinking about what you'd like to do next. It gets really overwhelming sometimes to think about, I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life. But we always say, don't worry about that. Just worry about what you want to do next. And so while we're in this, a little bit of a lull, sort of depending on what your profession and industry is, it's a great time to sit back and say, okay, 2022 is around the corner. Maybe the last 2 years have been a blur for you, but what do you want to do in 2022 work-wise? Do you want to do the same type of thing you're doing now, but just do it in a different place? Is it time to strike out on your own? Do you want to make a complete career change? So getting that clarity around started putting some definition around what is your next best step is the best way to get started, because just jumping into a search without having any idea what you're looking for really is a recipe for disaster. And that's not what we want. We've had plenty of that the last couple of years.
Yes, absolutely. And when people are getting prepared, resume, that's the first thing people say, I need to get my resume. And how do I start? With a lot of these like ZipRecruiters and these types of companies that help people find a job, or they might have to put in their resume through a portal online. Is that a smart thing to do? Do you recommend that? Or where do people start?
So online job seeking is certainly, relying on bulletin boards, relying on bulletin boards, relying on websites is seductive. In that it sounds like, oh, that's all I have to do is just sit and apply to a lot of places and hope for the best. And it really is, in a lot of cases, just sort of the job search or the work world equivalent of throwing something against the wall and hope something sticks. And that's never a good strategy. So yes, having your resume and your LinkedIn profile very much up to date is critical. But even before that, you have to think about, what do I want to do? So our process at the Bauke Group is think, plan, execute. And part of think and plan is, who am I and what do I want to do next? And then that needs to be reflected in your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So we think a lot of times about a resume as like just a dump, like a brain dump onto a piece of paper. Here's everything I've ever done, throwing it out to the world and hoping for the best. If you really think about it, that doesn't work in any other parts of our lives. So it's certainly not going to work here. So creating your LinkedIn profile and your resume based on what your next best move is really, really important. And then once you have some idea, even an idea that still feels vague to you, as I always say, just getting that clarity about what do I want to do more of, less of, never again. And then how can I find that in my next role? Sometimes we have to sort of inch toward career happiness instead of expecting that one day we're going to wake up and the career fairies come and, all of our problems are solved. And so what I know for sure is if you take no action, you're probably going to be miserable at work for quite a while. And we are in the best job market in a very long time.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, Texas has had a lot of attraction from different companies. However, we're also making headlines on being at the top of the list with the great resignation. So many people deciding to just go ahead and leave their jobs. Does that make for a stable job environment or a labor market?
To me, people changing jobs and moving around is extremely healthy because, we have read the stats for years have read that 68 to 70% of people are unhappy are disengaged or very disengaged at work. So that stat has not changed in a very long time. The only thing that's going to change it is people actually taking action and trying to find and looking, deciding that, you know what, as I always say, nobody cares about your career as much as you do, nor should they. And so when there's a lot of movement, it generally, it's temporarily destabilizing, can be for an organization or a market. But if people are actually moving on to something that's a better fit, because they feel like the economy's healthy enough to sort of support that, I think we all win. I always say, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're sitting at a 4, you're like, I am so miserable. We sit sometimes and think, well, I've got to get to a 10. No, you don't. What if you're a 4 and you made a move and you got to a 6? That's a 50% increase in your career happiness, and probably will end up in better pay, you being able to work and wanting to work longer, and just, frankly, just making you a more pleasant person to be around at work and at home. So I think all this movement we're seeing, it is a sign. It's disconcerting for employers because they've never been in this position ever, and they don't know what to do about it. So there's a lot of hand wringing going on, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of saying things like, people are lazy. Well, that's just not so. There's always people that are lazy, and people are not all of a sudden lazier than ever. We're just in a different world, and there's so many factors here at play. But if you just really sort of draw in and say, okay, what is it? If I could start with a blank slate, what would it look like? What would it have on it? What would I get to do? What would I get to avoid? Who would I work with? How would I work? Where would I work? Those sort of things. What mission and values would the organization have? If you really start to sort of take a self-inventory to say, where have I been the happiest and what do I want moving forward in my career? It's really quite enlightening. And if you do it in a planful way, then you will stay on path. I wrote a book called Stop Peeing on Your Shoes, Avoiding the 7 Mistakes that screw up your job search, based on the 7 mistakes people make. And if you can just enter into your job search in a planful and thoughtful way versus like, I'm just going to start pointing and clicking and hope for the best, you will end up better off, happier, and most likely making more money. So yeah, I say go.
My last question to you is just, for employers who know that right now they are at risk of losing employees, or maybe it's difficult for them just to retain them because of the pandemic that we're dealing with. We can't forget that is the big elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
What is some encouraging news or advice that you could give them that are listening right now who are preparing for first quarter?
So one of the things that I think we're going to see happen is I think we are going to see some people come back into the workforce. So people who have said, you know what, I'm going to take the rest of the year to think about what I want my future to look like, and I'm going to start stepping back in first quarter. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, but I do think we're going to see a little bit of an uptick there. And I hope that these people who've taken some time off to really think about what they want next are going to move into a role in which they will be happier, more productive, and one they can stay in for a while. So I think there's going to be an uptick. But one of the things that I absolutely have been cautioning employers about is that I do think there's still a healthy dose of denial in terms of what is that they don't have the leverage they used to. And one of the things that when you get so caught up in bringing people in through the front of the pipeline and hiring new people, you sort of forget about the people you already have. And those really are the ones you need to be spending a good portion of your time and resources on. So if you're sitting there thinking, and I've had clients, some of our individual clients say to me, my company, I'm 53 years old. They don't think I'm going anywhere. They're wrong. So if you are looking at your workforce saying, well, Jim's not going anywhere, Becky's certainly been here forever, you need to rethink that, because everybody in your organization, especially your really good ones, are at risk. They're going to be picked off by other companies, recruiters, et cetera, who find them on LinkedIn and through other sources. And so not only do you need a hiring and selection strategy, but you need a retention strategy. Don't assume that your people who are there are going to stay there, because I promise you they are also looking and they're watching. And if you're treating the people you're hiring better than you're treating them, and you're paying those people better than you're paying them, don't think that this is a big secret. They absolutely know what's going on, and they will be the first to leave. It's always your good ones who leave first, not, unfortunately, the ones that you don't care if they leave. Because, if they're sitting there and they're getting away with not doing much and not performing really well, and they believe you don't know that, they're going to stay there as long as possible. But the people who are really good and want to grow their careers, some of them actually want to grow their career with you, but you've got to have the courage and take the time and make the time to sit down and have those conversations with people to find out, why are they staying? If you're planning to stay, why are you planning to stay? If you are looking to leave, why would you leave? In other words, it's sort of the opposite of an exit interview. It's kind of a stay interview or a retention interview. Find out what's going on with your people. We've got to get away from this top-down management and leadership approach. And I think, I'm a boomer, so I can say this, boomers are the worst, because we think it's going to go back to the way it was. It is not ever going back to the way it was. So we've got to keep up with the times. Everybody does.